Hey everyone, welcome back to Berlin Noir. Today I'm going to be taking a little break from working on the updates and such that we've been doing for the past several episodes, and we'll be revisiting an area that we haven't built too long ago out here in Kreuzberg along the Landwehr Canal next to the couple churches that we've done fairly recently. And we'll be focusing on this little block here in the center right next to that Mariannenplatz, that large grass park area, and working on the hospital that is here. Today, this building functions mostly as a art house amongst several other things, but it's a cool little building. I like, I like this entire area. It's very unique. Especially back then, with the canal that was converted to the garden, and then the couple churches, as well as the reflecting pool nearby. It's just a really cool part of the city that I really enjoyed building. But here's a nice image that I found online of the hospital. I believe this is from the early 20s, since you can still see the actual canal flowing on the right side there. Ironically, when I was looking for pictures of this building, I usually search like whatever I'm doing and then just say 1930, since typically there's a lot more images of things in the early 1930s than there are in the late 1920s. Typically, of course, not always, but that's where I usually have the best luck. But I could find absolutely nothing, and then I was like, all right, let's try searching the hospital and then putting 1940. And for whatever reason, a bunch of images popped up, including that one, even though it was definitely not from the 1940s. So, yeah, I don't know, that's Google for you, I guess. It doesn't make any sense. But anyways, so for this, I wanted to focus on quite a lot of details, since this entire episode is just working on this hospital complex. I initially kind of thought I'd have enough time for working on some just generic blocks nearby, but I put enough detail and time into this so that it, as you can see, 23 minutes worth of just building this little complex here. But we do a little more than just simply, build this hospital here, since that is rather simple. So I wanted to make it look a little cooler, spice it up, I guess. But starting off, I wanted to add some sort of just little kind of driveway that goes up, goes up a little bit in elevation here for the entrance of the hospital, since I believe there looked to be like maybe some stairs or some sort of walkway going up to the front, and just a small little thing just to add a little more life to it, a little more character, I guess, to the building. But so the asset that I'm using for the hospital is one that I've used several times throughout the city. Some of you might have noticed, or if you're at least familiar with the assets. But the really cool thing about this particular asset is it comes in a lot of variations. Different sizes, different facades, just lots of variations that you can use the same style of building in different situations, maybe for industrial stuff, since that is what it's meant to be. It's meant to be some sort of industrial warehouse type thing. Or something like this. Even not so long ago, several episodes ago, we did the military barracks, and I used one of the assets from this pack to build it, and they look very, very different. You would put up a picture of that and next to this, and you wouldn't really be able to tell that they're the same asset. So yeah, I don't know, I've really quickly come to really, really like this particular asset, just because it can be used for so many things. And it's a really high quality one as well. I mean, I love the bricks, and that they could be colored to be, your typical kind of red brick color, or like this. In this case, I wanted to match the facade and the color. So we went for that kind of off-white, somewhat yellow, beigey color, whatever you want to call that. But yeah, and the entrance with those two kind of little pillars, those just match up pretty close to the real life building as well. So all in all, I knew this was the asset that I wanted to use ever since I kind of saw pictures of this hospital here and figured it was definitely going to be a nice little building, something good to detail, and I wanted to definitely make an episode out of it, and turned out to for now to be a good time to do that, since I asked you all last week if you wanted to kind of keep working on the updates, or if you want to occasionally take a break, work on some other things, and pretty much you all said to kind of do both. Keep with the updates, but also take some breaks occasionally. So I figured we did 3 episodes in a row of kind of updating the area. So I figured might as well take a quick little break and work on this. But for here, yeah, just on this little corner here, just using procedural objects to kind of make that seamless corner. You do have those slight little texture glitches on the roof, but other than that, it's pretty perfect. Here's a picture I wanted to include just of modern day, since really the facade itself, the building really hasn't changed. And just so you can see another angle of how the building compares to the one we're building here. And really the only thing that's very different, I would say, is the roof. So on here, the assets, as you can see, the roof goes up. It goes up to the points, the ridge, the apex, whatever you want to call it. Whereas the building in real life is flat. So yeah, I probably could have simply used PO just to flatten the roof, but that takes some time, and I do like the roof and the kind of those little sun, those windows on top, I guess a sunroof, whatever you want, whatever those are. But yeah, I figured it wasn't really necessary to flatten the roof and take all the time to do that. But so in making the slight elevation change, with the front of the building kind of being a little higher compared to everything else, I wanted to have some sort of kind of walkway, a path going around on the outside, just being, you know, like slightly higher, matching the ground at the front of the building. That way it can kind of wrap around, leading to that staircase going down right next to the door there, just to add something a little different, since again I kind of already said that I wanted to, you know, focus on detailing this. And I figured that'd just be a small little thing to add, that's, you know, kind of realistic, I suppose. I don't know if that is there, but there's certainly plenty of buildings just like that, where you have the walkway wrapping around and then the staircase is kind of going down to the ground floor at the back of the building or wherever else. But so in addition to just that main hospital complex building, there were several other ones, several other smaller buildings kind of in this area as well, looking at the aerial view and pictures of this hospital. And most of them seem to be completely different as far as like the architectural style. Obviously this one's kind of just a large brick, plain brick building for the most part, but the other ones kind of match your kind of typical small kind of German buildings. I don't really know what to call them, but yeah, basically to say they're different. So I wasn't really sure what to do there. I just did want to include some variation other than just this simple brick building. So I do later work on kind of like a little private residence, I guess a private house, which, you know, maybe it's for some doctors or who knows, but I did want to include something a little different, so we work on that in a bit. But I guess for now we're working on just the back side of the building, and again kind of raising the path up here so it's at the ground level of the front of the building, and then just kind of wrapping around there, and then we'll, you know, have some staircases and stuff going down to the ground level here in the back. Right here at the door here, I figured I'd rather than doing a staircase or anything like that, I would kind of just do a simple ramp, just to change it up so it's not just a bunch of staircases going around. And using the node controller mod kind of to get rid of the glitch of the two paths connecting at different elevations and different heights at the corner there, which is very useful to do whenever you have something like that, or even for something like this with the stone walls here. Sometimes it gets a little glitchy at the connection. You can kind of see there, but I didn't really do anything for this one since it's not really noticeable from any, you know, distance away, so I decided to leave that be. But yeah, I do find myself using the node controller mod a little more. See right there, I fixed those little glitches going down to that path there. It just makes everything so much smoother. So yeah, and I know I asked last week about switching over to the newer one, and yeah, I guess I'll probably stay with this one since I don't really want to necessarily risk anything with switching over to the newer one, even though I have used a new one and I kind of like it more. But then again, when I liked it more was for doing stuff with like highway connections and making really fancy intersections, which of course isn't really necessarily useful in a series like this. So I might as well just stick with this one since it is very useful and yeah, I still enjoy using that mod very much. But so yeah, here we are, like I said, kind of working the staircases around and just adding that little difference there. Working this wall around, I figured I'd use a different wall network compared to the ones I usually use, since for the most part throughout the city I've been using two wall networks, a brick wall, standard brick wall, and then that stone wall, which is right there with those red flowers there. Those two walls are my favorite by far, but I definitely find myself using them a bit too often. So, of course, it's always nice to change things up, even though this area is completely different from where we've been building recently, but nonetheless, I don't always want to use the same assets and networks and stuff all over the place just for the sake of reality or realism, and I don't want things to be too repetitive or anything like that. But yeah, so one thing that I had trouble with here, as you see, I'm kind of struggling with it, is I have the pavement networks, as you can see. Those are the ones I'm trying to work here. But underneath there, I have the terrain networks. Basically, it's just an invisible, I guess, little path, little road, whatever you want to call it. But here I was using those just to flatten out the terrain, since for whatever reason I was having trouble making this area perfectly flat, even though the terrain tools said it was perfectly flat. But the grass would be poking through the pavement networks here, as you see a little bit there, but it was much worse in other places, or the grass would be kind of going underneath and there would be kind of a gap. So I don't know why that's the case. I'm sure some of you run into that as well, where you are flattening an area or whatever, and sometimes it doesn't work, or it doesn't happen for all networks. So say for paths and such, many don't have this issue where the terrain doesn't have to be flat or anything. But since these networks here aren't actually paths, they're non-conforming. They don't conform to the terrain. So if the terrain is lower or higher, it'll poke through the pavement or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I guess since they're considered in game to be the same type of network, the pavement there and the terrain modifier network thing, since I guess the game classifies them as the same type of network, then they try to connect to one another, which can be a little bit annoying. But yeah, I don't know. I guess that's the advantage of not using these and rather using just straight up paths, even though paths aren't necessarily always. At least I don't like using paths as much, since I kind of mentioned this in the previous episode, but with the terrain the pavement network, there are various sizes, and for making kind of realistic parks and just large areas, plazas, whatever you're doing, I find that variation in path size to be very, very useful. But so moving on from that, we do go back later to detail that area, but I wanted to take a break and work on some other buildings in this little block here. And here is the kind of house that I mentioned that I included in the build. So I'm not sure if doctors would necessarily live here, probably not. So yeah, I don't know, whoever you want to live here I guess can, but can't think of necessarily any realistic reason why this house would be here. But perhaps maybe it's like an old thing that was here for a long time, since this hospital complex, I believe, was started being used as a hospital from the mid 1800s. So, obviously there's a lot of history. The building, I believe, existed even before then. So let's just say it goes back a long time. But I did want to, again, continuing with the details and adding a lot, make it look kind of nice and fancy. So just adding a little gate here and a little driveway going up. But in addition to just the gate for the car there, I also wanted to make a little one here for pedestrians coming off the sidewalk. Since I don't really ever do this, but realistically, it makes sense to have at least one little gate for whoever lives here, or for the people who live here to, of course, go through the smaller gate rather than having to open the bigger one, since that's pretty common. I see that in pictures and stuff all the time of German suburbs and such, which this might not be suburbs exactly, but I guess I'm kind of going for that vibe just in this small little area here for the home. But I also wanted to try something a little different, just I guess a new technique that I don't really ever do, and that's using these pavement, or these curb networks I should say, but I wanted to make like a raised path. So typically paths are on ground level, right? Like the pavement networks that I was just talking about, right? Those are perfectly flat against the grass, and you can't really, you don't, obviously you don't see any difference. They're just the same heights, and realistically, in real life, of course, usually there's some variation. Either the path is lower and the grass goes up on the curb or something, or maybe the path is raised like this. And usually I feel like the path is lower and the grass is raised on a curb. But I figured I'd try this just to see how it looks, since it is a little different, like I said. And up close, it looks pretty cool, I think, just having that slight little change and having the path be raised slightly. But from a distance, you honestly can't notice it at all. Even from an angle looking at it, it just kind of blends together as being on the same level, which was kind of unintentional. I was kind of hoping that it'd be a little taller, that'd stand out a little more. But I guess I could always go back and raise it, since I did kind of lower it to be a little closer to the ground. But I also used that grass decal, that kind of fancy mode grass decal, which I don't really ever use. I think I used it like one other time in the city. And that's really because I don't think it's necessarily realistic. I mean, if I had to guess, lawnmowers of this time weren't really fancy enough to kind of change how tall they wanted the grass to be mowed. Since, of course, that's how they do it. They adjust the heights of the mower, so the taller grass is usually a little darker. But that being said, who knows? Maybe a fancy lawnmower like that did exist. I doubt it, but perhaps. But either way, just to make it look a little fancier, look a little nicer, I wanted to do that. And again, just trying to change up the grass texture as I try and do. And just since I never use it, I figured I'd give it a try here again. But other than that, I didn't really add much to the grass, just those trees in the back, and then that little kind of bird bath there in the front, since I always like to add bird baths, since I don't know, I feel like that's a very old-fashioned thing in pictures in parks. I feel like there's almost always a bird bath, which, I don't know, I like that. I like, when I was younger, we always used to have those in the backyard, and bird feeders and such, so I always like to include those, which I've definitely been doing a lot more recently. But so moving on from that, this here is pretty much going to be the last thing for this episode. But in the aerial view, I noticed what kind of looked to be like some sort of garden or something. I really couldn't make it out, since it's in black and white and it's from a crappy camera in the sky, so obviously it's very difficult to make out small things like this. But the ground looked to be the same kind of colors and appearance as kind of like the allotment gardens that are, those are obviously easy to spot from the aerial view, but it had the same kind of grass texture and ground appearance and color. So obviously allotment gardens are gardens, and especially back then they were very well maintained, and you could really see clearly what was going on there. So considering it looked to be very similar to those, I figured this could possibly have been a little garden next to the hospital. And it doesn't seem out of the question, of course, you need food to feed all the people who are at the hospital. So I figured just be a small little detail to add, something quick and easy to do that's not very common, or I don't really have anywhere else around the city. So yeah, I wanted to include this here, and I totally forgot all the name of the assets here, since I looked up like garden and allotment, and like nothing came up for the most part. So I had to just scroll through all my like hundreds of props, which took a little bit. But yeah, I guess I just don't use these assets enough. But yeah, I do like how it turned out. It's a nice little change, breaks up kind of the monotony of just placing trees and bushes all the way around. But lastly here, just going to be placing some trees and bushes all the way around, since that is what it looked like to be in this area on the aerial view. So yeah, I always say this, that whenever I just see a bunch of trees all over the place, I'm always hesitant to just follow suit and do that and place trees all over the place, just because it always feels lazy and just I don't think always necessarily looks right. But in this case, I feel like it turned out all right. And of course, it is still realistic, since that is how it looked back then and today. But lastly, I just wanted to add this little statue here. And I didn't want it to look all colored like that, since I like kind of more marble-y and stone color statues. So I decided to just convert to PO, add that little color rectangle there, and kind of make it look a little more marbly, and I feel like that was achieved there by doing that. So with that, we're at the end of today's episode. Hopefully you all enjoyed it, and hopefully you all enjoyed the break from working on the updates and kind of completely redoing a large part of the center of the city. But most likely we'll be returning to that next week as well. So not exactly sure what we'll be updating / redoing, but there's definitely a few things left to do that are in desperate need of updates for sure. So if you liked today's video, definitely give it a thumbs up and leave a comment of anything you'd like to see built / updated in the future. So that'll do it, and I will see you all next time.